You ever notice guilt doesn't show up when you're messing up? It shows up when you finally start getting it right. Like the moment life gets good, guilt pops up like, hey, relax. You don't got to be happy yet.
It's like guilt hates progress. You heal a little, grow a little, smile a little, and guilt's like, nah, you forgot who you used to be.
And that's the thing. People drag guilt from old seasons into new ones, into new relationships, new opportunities, new identities, like emotional luggage with no wheels or a broken one.
But today, we're unpacking it because too many people are stepping into new lives while still apologizing for old ones.
Stay with us. By the end of this episode, you're going to realize something heavy. You don't owe your past an apology for choosing a better future. This is Outspoken. Here we go. All right, welcome back. Hey, listen, before we get started, make sure and smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, share the show with everyone you know, and hit the bell icon to get updated when we upload new episodes. Well, Joe, the guilt we carry in our new lives. This is something that I think everybody's dealt with at one time, right? It's wild.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. You know, and the thing is that, and we talk about this in our men's group, that, you know, guilt is one of many lies that is told to us, right? That we tend to believe, and it shames us, and it just makes us feel horrible. But we're listening to a lie. And like we talk about, and again, in our men's group, we have to name that lie. And only then can we face it and deal with it, right? So when people want to move on in their lives, they feel guilty, right? And that is important that we understand why joy feels like a betrayal after long seasons of pain, right? Why feeling guilty for healing too fast is shameful. You know, like leaving relationships, marriages, or identities behind, like all those outgrowing people who expected you to stay the same, like all those, we shouldn't feel guilty for these things at all, you know? But we do.
Right. It's hard because coming out of any kind of relationship, you almost feel like, and especially for men, and that's what a lot of our sessions and of course our men's group that we deal with right now, men feel guilty because they feel like they failed, right? We feel like we failed. We feel like we didn't do enough. We didn't do what was required of us as men to keep the relationship going, keep it alive. And, you know, we carry that for a long time, man. A lot of guys don't admit to it. You know, they go into the next relationship, and it's not, and I don't want any women watching this, it's like, oh my gosh, he's bringing his exes in. No, it's not that, but you still remember those things. And, you know, we all have that whole thing of red flags and all that kind of stuff that, you know, always gets pitched around in life now and relationships and stuff. Anybody, and this would include women, your past relationships, things that were quote unquote red flags or green flags in your next relationship, that stuff triggers. It does. You see patterns, right? And it's just like if you were in an abusive relationship, whether that's physical or verbal, mental abuse, if somebody starts doing those things, even close to it, those are red flags. Those are triggers that go off that you're like, oh no, I don't want any part of this because I already went through this. And that person may not be like that at all. It's just some of the things they do, their mannerisms or whatever it is, just triggers you in that way and makes you feel that it's going to, you know, trip you up like a previous relationship. So,
well, it's like association. Like when you're a kid, you associate certain colors. You associate red with a fire hydrant, red with the fire department. You know, you associate blue with police. You associate green with go. It's association. So let's say you come from a bad relationship where there's a lot of screaming and yelling, right? And now you go into this different relationship where the person raises their voice. Not even yelling, just raises their voice like, hey, that's not what I'm talking about. And they're like, stop yelling at me. You're associating that as that person. And you can't do that. You can't associate one with the other because they're two different things, right? It's wild how people feel guilty for finally choosing peace. Like happiness is cheating, right? Sometimes the guilt isn't even about the person you left. It's about the version of you that stayed too long. You know what I mean? And that's key because a lot of people stay in these relationships thinking, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make everything happen. But you're slowly deteriorating yourself. You're eroding, right? Because that's what happens. You start eroding. Let me tell you a story, Jay. I remember talking to someone who finally walked away from a relationship that drained them for years. And the crazy part, the moment they felt peace, they panicked, right? They told me it feels wrong to feel this good. Not because anything bad was happening, but because they weren't used to calm. They weren't used to choosing themselves. They weren't used to not hurting.
Yeah, you know what, man? That's real. Sometimes peace feels like betrayal when pain was your normal, right? You start thinking, did I give up too soon? Kind of like we were saying, did I fail? Did I quit on something I should have fixed? But the truth is, they didn't quit. They just finally stopped bleeding.
Exactly. And guilt tried to convince them that healing was disloyal, that moving on meant they owed the past an apology. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and not look back, right? And a lot of people say, like, well, looking back, I should have done this. You can't look back. You have to move forward, because then that's that guilt. That's that lie that you're being told that no, you're wrong. You're never going to change. This is what you deserve. You don't deserve happiness, and blah, blah, blah. The lie goes on and gone. It becomes a lie. Then that lie becomes a cycle, and you never break out that cycle. And guess what? The happiness that you deserve, you'll never reach. You never obtain. Why? Because you believe the lie, right? And that's something we talk about all the time. So the guilt of past failures, Jay. People don't carry guilt because they're guilty. They carry it because they're finally aware.
Yeah, and awareness without grace turns into a life sentence you were never meant to serve.
Yeah, and you're right, because carrying mistakes long after life has forgiven you is a burden. You carry now these burdens with you. Whether these decisions that you have to make, and no one says, Jay, you and I agree, that decisions like these are never easy. Whether
No.
it's for the better or for the worse, right? Staying
Right.
too long versus leaving too late, which was the right thing to do,
That's
right?
that's perfect.
Right. Parenting guilt, right? Like, as a parent, oh my God, I failed my children, right? Relationship guilt. Oh my God, I should have done more, right? Self-worth guilt. Like, oh man, I knew if I wasn't this about me, and you and I have talked. I've felt guilty about a lot of things that I've done in my past, and not because I truly felt like I did something wrong, but because maybe I left the wrong way. Maybe I should have apologized. Maybe I should have done simple things or different things. But you learn to let go, and you learn to deal with those. You learn to manage that and say, you know what? Perhaps it was my fault, and perhaps I could do better. And I do, and I will. Right. But to lie to yourself and to believe the lie that if, when you're finally happy, when and if you find, let's say, God, and you find this peace and this tranquility in life, should you feel guilty about leaving those friends behind who don't follow what you follow, who don't believe in what you believe? No, absolutely not. You should not feel guilt over that. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big things is, and we've used this analogy quite a few times for people that are like go through AA, right? Or NA. One of the first things you have to do is you have to remove yourself, bro, from those situations and those people that keep dragging you back into whatever that, situation is. So, and it's the same thing in relationships. And you said something just a few minutes ago, staying too long versus leaving too late.
Yeah.
It's a perfect analogy of what goes through us and what.
We've both been guilty of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Heck yeah, man.
Of feeling that, right? Like,
Oh,
my God,
man,
you know what I mean?
And again, so just like I said in the beginning of this, going into a next relationship, I can remember a relationship, 10 relationships back. I'm just
Yeah.
using a round number, but
Yeah.
10 relationships back that I did stay way too long, right? We were in a relationship too long. She was abusive,
Yeah.
very verbally abusive, but she actually smacked me, and she was pretty rough. Broke into
Yeah.
my house, tried to break stuff, all
Jeez.
kinds of crazy nonsense, and said she was going to pull a knife on me and stuff. So, and why do you stay with people like that, right? It doesn't. Here's the thing: it doesn't start like that. Relationships never start like that.
No.
But things get crazy and out of hand. And here's the problem: is that in this, people are going to be like going, Jay, what the heck? Why didn't you get out of that? Well, again, it didn't start like that, and you hear
never
this.
do.
You hear this all the time, especially with females in like physically abusive relationships, and they remain with the guy, right? And the problem with it is, in the psychology, is you say, well, he's hitting you, and he's being really abusive, or just manhandling, maybe not, full abuse or whatever, but just being rough kind of thing. And it's like, but at one time, that was her whole world. She loved that man more than anybody else.
No, I agree.
So that just doesn't disappear. It gets chipped away at over time, right? With the abuse. And finally, that bank account of love
Is
reaches a
drained.
zero and a
Yeah.
negative, and that's when you leave. So,
And you're right. And I've seen abuse both firsthand in my life, and I've seen it in working in law enforcement. And it's so crazy because women defend their abusers to the T, right? I mean, it goes to the point where law enforcement has to hide them because they will, and we have to detain them because they will take off and try to be with them. But here's the thing: they make excuses, right? And one of the biggest things is they make excuses and they believe the lie. They feel like, well, you know what? Maybe if I didn't talk back to him that way, he wouldn't have hit me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have angered him. I could have been nicer. There's no reason in the world, any world, where regardless how you speak to someone, they don't deserve to put hands on you. They could simply turn around and walk away. They could simply say, done. You know what I mean? I don't want to argue with you. Done. Right? There's no reason for that. But they justify the abuse in their own head because of guilt and shame and right all these things. And then well, where would I go to? I have nowhere to go because why? They believe the lies. If you leave me, you'll be broke and you'll not blah blah. It's a cycle, bro. You believe the lie, you continue the lie, and you create this cycle. So let me ask you, how does guilt show up in your relationships?
well, just like you were saying right now, guilt will have you apologizing for things you haven't even done.
Or assuming someone's going to leave you because someone else did. That's guilt pretending to be intuition, right? Where we either are over explaining or overcompensating on relationships, right?
Yeah.
We're either expecting abandonment because, oh, you know what, it happened to me in the past, it's going to happen with you. Now we're again associating certain things. You know what, if I raise my voice a little bit, she's going to associate me with the past and say, you're abusive, you're going to leave me. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said what? But again, sabotaging good things. One of the things that I've seen is women love to sabotage their own, I can't even speak English today, their own relationships. And I feel,
Yeah.
and let me tell you why, Jay. And I've seen this with my God rest her soul, my own mother. They feel guilt, right? Whether it's the children, whether it's their own family, whatever guilt that they carry or the lies that they believe, they want to sabotage a good relationship because they feel that they don't deserve it. And that's horrible. Like to get into your mindset that I don't deserve this, to be happy, to feel peace. I mean, like, who would think that? Feeling undeserving of love or stability is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, but it happens. And let me tell you why it happens, Jay. And I feel, and I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I feel it happens because, again, in a religious aspect, as far as like you and I are involved in, guilt is such a liar. Guilt is a heavy burden to carry because it feeds you lies. It tells you your shortcomings. It tells you your no one loves you. It tells you that this is the only love you'll ever find. It tells you so many lies, and we start believing them. And it's just crazy how guilt shows up in your relationships. I know you wanted to tell me about some guy that you had talked about, I think.
Yeah, so knew a guy who got into a healthy relationship after years of chaos. And bro, he didn't know what to do with it. Every time she'd ask, "Are you okay?" he'd panic. He thought it meant something was wrong.
Because in his past, "Are you okay?" probably meant a fight was coming.
Exactly. So he'd over-explain everything. He'd apologize for things he didn't even do. And he assumed she was going to leave because someone else did. That wasn't intuition. That was guilt wearing a disguise.
And see, and that's the thing, Jay, that when you've been punished for being human, you start treating love like a test. You're destined to fail. Yep. Like it's going to fail. So I'm just going to get into it, right? But she wasn't testing him. She was choosing him. She just had to stop letting guilt answer the question for him, right? And that's the thing, that he kept answering it with the guilt that he carried. He wasn't answering it from her perspective. Again, association, right? He would, and I'm assuming that's the reason. Like he associated "Are you okay?" with someone else that did the same thing and dumped him, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we're seeing the same pattern, because we see this again, association. We see this things happening, and you know who I've heard talk about this is incredible, because I really don't listen to him, but I've heard this. I'd heard him say, Tony Robbins, is that his name? That the guy,
Anthony Robbins, yeah,
that guy. I've heard him say that about associating people with stuff that happened in your past.
Right.
When someone says a certain thing, it triggers you. It's like, oh my God, he said the same thing, or she said the same thing that what's the name said. We're done. He's going to break up with me, or he's yelling at me, or now comes the abuse, or now, you know what I mean? And that's a scary thing because, again, we believe the lie, right? So what are the lies that guilt tells us, right? And here's the thing. Guilt is a storyteller, right? And it's a terrible author.
Yeah, it writes fiction and calls it memory.
Right. Like, for example, you don't deserve this. You're going to mess this up. You owe your past loyalty, right? You can't be happy until you fix everything behind you. All lies. All lies. You know, Jay, I remember talking to someone who finally got into a season of stability after years of chaos, right? New job, new relationship, new peace. And you think they'd be celebrating, right? But instead, they kept waiting for something to go wrong. They told me, it feels too good. Something's going to fall apart. I always mess things up. So let me tell you, brother, that's guilt talking. That's not truth. That's the past trying to convince them the future can't be different.
Right.
And the wild part is nothing was wrong. Nobody was mad at them. Nothing was falling apart. But guilt kept whispering, you don't deserve this. You're going to ruin it. You're not built for good things.
Yeah. You know, man, something that when you were talking, I was thinking about, because you just kind of hinted to it, was we project past relationships to situations with the current relationships, right? So things that you experienced in the past, now you're just, again, projecting that to the present relationship. And it's one of the worst things we can do, because if your current partner finds out that you're basically thinking about your ex situation, you know, that's really disrespectful to them, because you're assuming that they're going to do all the same things, they're going to have the same reactions and everything, and they don't. Now, the only caveat to that is that we do need to know when we have certain issues or certain triggers or certain things that do mess us up personally in a relationship. You and I have talked about this before, and I had a good buddy of mine years ago. He said, you know, I had this ex-wife and she was crazy and we got divorced, and then I had another wife and then she became an ex-wife. She was crazy. We got divorced, and then I got married again. So now he's on his fourth wife. He's like, every time I get divorced, and you know, they're crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, but what was the one thing I noticed in all of those photographs? I was the common denominator. I was the one in every one of those photographs. So he goes, you know, once I hit my fourth marriage, I realized, man, I was the problem in the other three at some point, right? It's a 50-50 thing. You know, we've talked about that too, 100% in relationships, and 80-20 and 50-50 and all that.
Yeah.
But in the blame, there is, no matter what, even if you have an abusive person, not walking away from them, that is part of the problem, right? Because you're allowing them to continue their nonsense. So we do have to get to a point where we give up all that, you know, all that past trauma, past whatever you want to call it. We need to release the weight, right? You can't heal guilt by carrying it.
Right. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. You heal it by understanding it and then refusing to let it define the next chapter. But here's the truth, Jay. Just because you've lived through storms doesn't mean that you can't trust the sunshine, right? Sometimes the only thing broken is your voice in your head telling you that you're still the person you used to be, and you're not, you know? And like we talked earlier, you have to name the guilt. You have to call it for what it is, you know, because that's the lie. The guilt is the lie. Right? Separating responsibility from shame. You know, so many people carry shame about things in their life. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. We've carried shame. I carry shame about things, you know, but we cannot allow it to take us away from the responsibilities that we have. It has to be separated, right? But shame, again, is a lie to us, you know, because God is always there and always forgives us, is ready for us to come back every time. We've heard the story of the prodigal son, always waiting, right?
Right.
Never leaves our side. You know, we need to forgive people when possible. We need to apologize where it's needed, right? Not apologize because it's not needed or because we feel guilty. Apologizing is not about feeling guilty. Apologizing is saying, I realize I did something wrong and I want to apologize for that.
Right.
You know?
And the other side of that is forgiving when
correct.
You know, when possible. I mean, and that's another tough one. That's very biblical, right? Mm-hmm. We are supposed to forgive and, you know, thank our enemies. And that's, man, when it comes to love life and relationships and stuff, that gets very hard to do.
Yeah. No, and I agree here. And this is the thing, Jay. You guys might have noticed that we didn't have scripture in here. We didn't have a lot of things, but this is truly biblical in every sense, guys. Because when we mature, right? We go from, and when I say mature, I don't mean like from infancy to teenage, adolescence to an adult. I don't mean that. When I say mature, is when we're in a relationship with a friend, with a loved one, with God, and we're growing in that relationship. We have to accept that growth. But here's the thing, in that growth, there's going to be things that are going to fall off. There's going to be things that you're going to turn back. It's like, that wasn't good for me. And I need to move past that. I am growing. And this is the thing, people, we have to understand. The people in your life, surround yourself with people in your life who are going to grow with you, not hold you down, not anchor you down, not hinder your growth, but grow with you, push you, shove you all the way to the top, because those are the people that truly love you, like in a biblical sense, that sacrifice themselves for your peace, for your love and devotion, right? Center your life around God first, right? And here's the thing, accept growth, the growth that God gives you to move on to a new relationship without self-punishment. Why are you punishing yourself? God is the one that's in charge of that, not you. You grow. The closer you get to God, the more the people that should not be around you will wither away, right? And
100%.
that's what's important. That's not guilt, ladies and gentlemen. That's growth in spirituality. That's growth in yourself. That's growth in maturity in all terms, right? So then comes the spiritual grounding, right? Grace, renewal, identity, right? People always say, I have to find myself. You know who you are. See, that's the thing. People come out of a relationship. Let me tell you, and this is something I heard today, and I thought about it, and it kind of like got me thinking. I'm like, I know what you're saying, but here's the thing: you're in a relationship so long, and it could be a one that just is bad. It goes bad.
It happens.
You lose your identity, right? So that person in that relationship isn't you. You lost it. The moment you come out, you find yourself. You realize, man, I feel good. You finding yourself makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Now, if you remain that same person in another relationship, what are you looking for? You found yourself. You're there.
Yeah.
There's nothing to find. You found it. What the problem was, you lost it in another relationship.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems too with identity, like you're saying, is that especially the longer you're in a relationship, right? You know my ex-wife, I know your ex-wife, right? You were together much longer than we were together,
Yeah.
right? And
over 20 years.
Yeah, and part of your personal identity, bro, becomes is obtained from them, right? Because you don't know anything else. Like that is your life. And then when you stack kids on that, and soccer games, and all those things, that is part of your identity. And when all of a sudden that stuff washes away, you're kind of lost, right? You're lost in the wilderness for a moment. And that is something I think that is difficult the longer a relationship goes on. I mean, I've heard so many times these people that are, bro, they got together when they were like in high school, and they're getting divorced, and they're like 60 years old, getting divorced. And you think about that. So if you just take it from an even number, 20, right? You got together 20, that's 50 years. So the age we are right now, almost, it, is
I'm lucky if I could give another good 5 years.
Yeah, how long these people have been married and lived a life together, and now that just whoosh, disappears. Man, how tough is that on your personal identity? Because that was your identity for so long. So
right, but that's the thing, is that we've adapted to that identity, but it's not who we were.
No,
and it shouldn't define us.
Right.
We are who we are, and that doesn't change whether we're carefree, whether we're talkative. It shouldn't change who we are, but because we've taken on responsibilities, we've taken on identity of a mom, identity of a dad, identity of a brother, of a sister, of a brother, whatever the case is, we've taken on that role. It's a role we took, not an identity.
Right.
It's a role. The problem is, once we separate, we divorce, or we leave these friends, or whatever the case is, we have to detach ourselves from that identity. And that's the hard part. But who we are remains the same, and that's where we find each other again. You find yourself, and you say, like, there I am, But then here comes the bad part to it, the guilt. Why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way. I just left my wife of 20 years with 3 kids. I shouldn't feel happy, But what happened in that marriage, it had nothing to do with the kids, it had to do with the wife. And I feel relieved. I feel good. Why do I allow that guilt to shame me, right? And to guide my future? Here's the thing, Jay. Your past shaped you, but it doesn't owe you. It doesn't own you.
Right.
right?
And your future doesn't need your guilt. It needs your presence.
You're on the money today, brother, and that's what I like about you. You know what I mean? You're on the money, but you're not guilty for healing, bro, and that's very important because I know it took time for me, it takes time for you, it takes time for everybody, right? But you should not feel guilty for it because you're renewing yourself, you're transforming yourself back to who you are at peace with, where you're happy with, right? And if that doesn't include someone that you expected to spend the rest of your life with, that's not on you. It's not, right? You're not guilty for growing. You can be guilty for that. People have to grow. Here's the thing, Jen, I mentioned earlier. If you and I were in a relationship, right?
One of those.
Kind of, yeah. If we were in a relationship, which we're not,
We need to
either
change our
I'm,
pronouns or something. I don't know.
yeah, I know. Either I'm going to push you, right, to grow, or I'm going to hold you down like an anchor,
Right.
right? But as you can't drag me with you because then you're not progressing. And you can't carry all the burden, right? Because you're not doing it together. Growth should be together. Growth shouldn't be separately. It should be as a unit, right? You shouldn't, and you shouldn't feel guilty for choosing joy. You should never choose it. I mean, you should never feel guilty for that. Joy should be part of a relationship, whether it's between two friends, like you and I, two brothers, like you and I, or between a man and a woman, a cat and a dog, whatever. You should always choose joy because that's what's important. Joy is what you should be seeking. And if you feel guilty for it, then you're in the wrong relationship, right? And remember that your past is a chapter. Your past is a chapter, not a sentence. So that's a double meaning. It's not a sentence, right? You're not locked up for your past. You move on. You have to progress. You have to grow. Here's the thing, man. I used to. There was this kid I used to mentor, and he was a great kid, but his mind wasn't there. It wasn't focused. This was one of the jobs that I had, and he was a good kid, but he's getting in trouble. And I'm like, and he talked to me. He's got family problems at home and blah blah. And I said, those issues at home I understand, but you got to let them go. You gotta focus on you. Your family's your family. There always will be. There'll always be problems. There'll always be issues. But if you get dragged down with them, what's that say about your future? About you? You have a bright future. You're a great kid. You're intelligent. And he's like, no, I know. And he had a great mind, and he got consumed by his family's problems. He made his family problems his own problems. And because his family wouldn't stop, he couldn't drag him out. He got sucked into it and ultimately got caught committing a crime.
Gosh.
Ended up going, serving time, came out, wanted to reform, ended up going out to the streets, got some tattoos. I'm not saying that tattoos are bad. I have tattoos, but you could see the progression. You know, like if you see booking records of this kid, he goes from 0 tattoos to facial tattoos to straight up gangbanger, right? And he had so much future. And it made me sad because he allowed his past to dictate his future. He couldn't let go of things that were dragging him down, and the family wouldn't progress. And it was sad to see, and it consumed him because he thought he owed them something. And you don't owe anyone nothing but God. And so you have to learn to let go sometimes. You have to learn to, because if you don't, Jay, let me tell you, it will consume you. I know this firsthand. If you don't let go of things, they consume you. You feel regret. You feel hate, anger. There's a shish kebab of feelings that you get. And I lived with that for so long because of what happened to my mother. And it took years and years. And you saw how unhappy I was. You see all the mistakes I made in life because I let that past carry forward with me and in me every step of the way. So let it go. You did what you can. Give the rest to God. That's all I can say about that.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, when you were telling that story about the young guy that kind of made some bad decisions and stuff like that, there's this personal development speaker. His name's Eric Thomas, and I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody that has kids, especially young kids. He's got a bunch of stuff on YouTube. It's totally free to watch it. And he goes to like these inner city high schools, especially. He does go to colleges and things like that, but a lot of the high schools and inner cities and stuff where there's more troubled teens, right? Where there's more issues and stuff like that. And he played football for a little while and stuff. But he grew up with a single mom and tough neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. And one of his key things that he said that really got to me, and this kind of, again, reflects to the story you were talking about, is that he said, how old are you guys now? Like, when was this going on, when all this stuff, your dad and your cousins and gangs and all that, when you were 8, when you were 10? He's like, how old are you now? You're 19, you're 20 years old. You were 8 back then. Like, get over it. Like, you at what point in your life are you going to have to be 50? Or are you going to have to be 75 before you say, oh, now I can finally get over it? So the reason I say that, and to piggyback on the story that you said, was in every situation in life, you're carrying around a bag of bricks, dude. At one point or another, you got to put them down. You got to put them down. And we can't carry around all this guilt and animosity and all these other things towards people. You got to forgive. You got to, and it's not forget, that whole saying, forgive and forget. You're never going to forget when people did you really wrong and stuff like that.
No.
But man, I'll tell you what, it will make you feel so much better if you pray about it and you just say, you know what, that person did me wrong or whatever. And I pray for them and I wish them the best in the world. I don't wish any harm on them and everything. And let it go, put the bricks down, move on with your life. And because the more of that stuff you carry around, the less room you have in the bag, the less room you have for more bricks of your future. Right. And the stuff that's going to do good for you. And you need to make enough room in there for yourself, for your future endeavors, relationships, and most importantly, God. Needs to be enough room because there's so many times we can make excuses, to not do things. And man, putting priorities in place are really important. We only have it's a finite amount of time we have on this rock, and
you're right,
and we got to spend it properly. So,
you know what? If it wasn't for the fact that now I see my past not as a burden, not as a guilt stricken, but as a learning experience, it's changed and transformed my life so much where I'm like, you know what? That was bad. I shouldn't have done that, or I should do better. And I do that now. I take moments where, now, am I perfect? Absolutely not. Do I react to things in a certain way? Yeah, we all, we talked about I-17 all the time.
yeah.
We do react about things. But I think the biggest thing, and here's the progress that we see, is that you recognize it. You identify, you're like, nah, wait a minute. That's a bad reaction. I shouldn't have done that. I need to step back and rethink that, and I think it's key. And I think that the reason I'm at peace today, the reason that I live guilt free in so many ways, is because I see things differently. I've released and let go of the past that held me down. And I think a lot of people need to realize that you're not in this alone at all. Everyone has gone through this guilt that you feel, and everyone's going to tell you the same thing. Let it go. Let it go. Because you could only do so much. Again, there's only so much you could do in a relationship. You can't carry it. If you carry that relationship and you exhaust yourself, is there really any room to change that? Like, do you guilt shouldn't even be a thing. Like, oh, maybe I should have done this differently. But guilt is the lie, and it tells you this and that. And I can't feel that way. I can't feel like, oh, I did too much for this person, or I did too little for. I have to say, you know what? I was in a position to do what I did. Might have been the best decision, but I am here today, and from that I learned, and I'm going to do better today than I did yesterday, and much better tomorrow than I did today. And that's all we can do. Right. And not associate things with the past. Like, if you're with someone and something, and they say, like, if they go, hey, high five, you're not going to go like, he's going to slap me. Right. You can't associate those things anymore.
Why
you gotta
can't she slap?
Yeah. you gotta disassociate those people. And remember, this person is not the same as that person. We're
That's
just
right.
all different. And we have to give everybody the equal, and it's the law. EEO, right? Equal opportunity.
Equal opportunity.
Let's stop playing these games. I'm going to start reporting people. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, gosh, Joe, this was a good one. I think it was a really important topic to get out there.
It is.
Dear
to my heart.
Yeah. Maybe help people, man, one of the things we've talked about, guys, is that we want to help just one person. We want to help a ton of people, but one person, if one person can get something good from anything we talk about, man, we've done our job. So, well, thank you guys for joining us. Before we get out of here, make sure and smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, share the show with everyone you know, and hit the bell icon to get updated when we upload new episodes. Well, like we always like to say, take care of one another.
And remember, do better, be better.
And as always, God bless America.
We'll see you guys next week. Have a wonderful week, and it's good to be back.
See you next Tuesday.